Welcome to another episode of the Total Innovation Podcast, where we explore transformative ideas, strategies, and solutions shaping the future of innovation and planet Earth. Today, I am truly excited to welcome to the podcast a renowned thought leader and self-described innovation journeyman, whose career has spanned decades and continents. Still looking young, though. His journey into the world of innovation began over 20 years ago, and since then, he has dedicated himself entirely to understanding, developing and advancing innovation in all its forms. From championing innovation, capacity and capabilities to pioneering work in ecosystem thinking, and his contributions have earned him recognition from organizations and institutions worldwide. Through his research, advisory work, and publishing on platforms like LinkedIn, as well as his own websites, he's become a leading advocate for ecosystem-driven innovation. Beyond this thought leadership, his personal and professional journey is one of remarkable depth. He's held senior management roles across global organizations, managing turnarounds, leading startups, and overseeing significant operational transformations in regions across Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, basically the world, right, Paul? Since transitioning to advisory work, he's focused on mentoring organizations and individuals, helping them embed innovation into their DNA and designing ecosystems that drive transformative change. And today, we're going to be diving deep into that topic of partner ecosystems, how interconnected networks of partners, collaborators, and stakeholders are reshaping industries and driving long-term value. And with that, it is an honor to welcome today's guest to the podcast. Welcome, Paul Hobcraft.
Thank you, Simon, for such a glowing introduction. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to having a nice conversation with you, as we always do.
Yeah, well, I'm going to draw on all those years of experience and wisdom, Paul, as we go today. From
the grey hairs are falling out, so wisdom is obviously going with those grey hairs.
Not in the slightest, not in the slightest. So, as I said in my intro, right, you've had a breadth of experience. You've been working across this very nebulous innovation space for a little while now, right? And you've got the bruises, I'm sure, to tell of, and the successes along the way for the work that you've done. And you've chosen in more recent times, and I've been following this very closely in our discussions online and others, to dig into the topic of innovation ecosystems, and I guess more specifically, partner ecosystems. Can you talk a bit about why you've chosen to focus there in this very nebulous space that you could go anywhere with, really?
Yes. For me, innovations in coaching, in capability, in building capacity, I've been doing that for a long time. And somebody was saying the other day that, nothing's changed over the last 10 years or whatever else. And I replied and said, do we continue to flog the dead horse, or should we begin to think in a very different way? And I do think taking innovation and putting ecosystems onto it really does open you up to saying, my thinking has to move out of a company, one individual company, into a much broader network of companies. And to do that, I've got to start thinking differently. And ecosystems are, for me, the place that people start needing to think so they can start collaborating and co-creating.
I described up front this aspect of visionary, and I think this is an awkward shift for companies, right? In terms of trying to think about it, there's lots that's structured around them in ways that makes this difficult for them to start to operationalize. And we're going to talk later about some good examples of it. Before we do that, maybe let's just get a little bit into definition, because we're leading with something new, and there are examples out there of ecosystems that have gone well, but let's just define it, right? What do we mean by an ecosystem? What do we mean by a partner ecosystem? And how does that differentiate from standard partnerships that organizations might be familiar with?
Let's go with the partner ecosystems versus partnerships. I think what partnerships do is they're a prelude into partner ecosystems. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Partnerships are very specific, very focused on a problem to resolve, like a supply chain problem. they also do have a tendency to be a net zero sum game. And I believe ecosystems need to be with a win-win. So you begin to progress from that net zero into more win-wins. It has a much longer term aspect to it, partner ecosystems. So partnerships are more project related, more system related in the immediate or in the medium term. There is also a scale difference. You're scaling up between two partners or three partners. When you're dealing with ecosystems, you've got to deal with a magnitude of scale because of the diversity of the people you hopefully are going to attract into your ecosystems. So the complexity is broader, and it's a much deeper dive you need to do to go into partner ecosystems. You need to build that network of partners, and you don't go to the one that you naturally think, oh, that is my partner. You search for the ones that are going to give you a different viewpoint of business or a different opportunity to get into a new market or to give you a different scope of operating or whatever. So it gives also a much broader innovation potential, which I think is really important from a partner ecosystem point of view. It gives you market reach. It gives you potential for expansion. It enables you to resource share in a more collective and more intelligent way. And it gives you a greater chance for value creation. And I think that applies to all of the way I see ecosystems taking place. So as one goes down that thinking of partner ecosystems, you can say, well, all ecosystems need to try to apply that type of criteria.
Yeah, in thinking about this, and I know you and I have had a few discussions on this in real life and over various forms of media as well, because I had a slight problem with the word ecosystem. I believe in it. And as you know, from a business perspective, under some of your stewardship and guidance as well, we started to adopt the language more. And it isn't because I don't believe in it, it's because I have a problem with, I guess, two things. One is adopting terms from other areas that I just don't see being systematically introduced into the business world. The business world likes to take these words and use them, but they're meaningless, right? And so networks, and you said it earlier, kind of interconnected networks and value chains makes sense to me. Ecosystems sound very esoteric. And if you look at the definition of an ecosystem as a dynamic network of interconnected entities that interact with and depend on each other to sustain their collective existence and growth, it's a nice metaphor for what we might like to see in business. The reality of it is obviously very far removed from that when you think about competition, regulation, and all the other stuff that comes into how businesses operate versus the reality of those things. And so I believe squarely that we need to get there. But what's holding companies back, do you think? Because most are a long way away from this, which is why it's so visionary, some of this thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled in the last 12 months to get across as much as I would like to the message about partner ecosystems and their value. And you then have to say, well, let me step back and think what is holding a company back. And you've got a whole host of things which are holding them back in other areas as well, which is, have they got the internal capabilities and the skills and the flexibility of mind to actually adjust to this different world that ecosystems argues for? Can they get a greater alignment and vision with a number of other companies when they sometimes don't get alignment and vision within their own company? That's a problem. Their culture and their mindset, when you come up against another company that has got a different culture or a different mindset, it's going to be clashing. And that makes the CEO or leadership very, very mindful and very, very thoughtful. You've got resource allocation constraints running in companies at the moment, but you've got a lot of fear. When you open yourselves up, when you move beyond open innovation into ecosystem open innovation, you're suddenly thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do with my IP? What am I going to do with my data sharing? What am I going to do with my security? All these things come crowding in. And when you haven't even mastered it in your own company, which so many haven't, it becomes a huge barrier to move forward. Now, what is going to compel companies to move forward is they've got to move away from risk aversion, because I believe we are heading towards a more volatile world in the next 12 to 48 months at least. And we've got to recognize that we've got a short-term focus, of course, that we've got to say, well, how do we trim our costs? How do we, most probably don't go into new ventures, but you could go into shared new ventures. So you can say, what partnerships have taught me is a shared venture. How do I open up that shared venture into something that's going to mean I can do better risk sharing, better resource allocation, better integration, greater diversity of opinion? So all of these things are potentially ahead of you if you start thinking in a more ecosystem mindset than in a straightforward my own company mindset.
Within that very optimistic and joyous outlook of more uncertainty and more chaos, I tend to agree, although the optimist in me hopes that we're not, and we're moving into calmer waters, at least in certain ways. What is it that makes you believe that ecosystems are so profoundly important in that, given all that complexity, given the fact that the structures are almost set against them, right? Like how do you weigh against that of like, okay, I need to get out of risk, but my risk is increasing because volatility's, increasing, versus, there's a solution here, but I barely understand it and I'm not set up to achieve it.
I think you've got to start, as I say, the whole mindset does change with this. And it's going to take you time to think through what that will mean, as you've just rightly said. We live in an environment. We don't live in just a given one space, our own space. We've got to interact. We've got to build out. We've got to establish relationships, not only with other companies that can provide us with new opportunities and new markets and new gains and new diversity of opinion, but we've got to recognize that our customer is changing, and they're changing very radically and very fast. And I think this is where you could say that ecosystems has got to adjust to. We've got more chance to get data. We've got more chance to interrogate and to get closer to our customers than ever before. How are we going to interpret that? Are we going to interpret that in an island or in our own silo? Or are we going to break that out into a broader environmental one to say, look, I don't have to take on the world, but what I need to do is I need to expand out and recognize that, I may be a tree in a forest, but I've got to start looking around and say, are there other trees around me that are going to support me? And how do they support me? How do they nourish my roots? How do they actually give me a bit more sunlight? How do they give me a chance to be a little bit different? So if you start thinking ecosystems from a natural perspective initially, bring it back into a business, I think you can begin to move comfortably through ecosystems. That's why I have gone more into mentoring and coaching and advising on this, to bring people through this significant change, because I think they are going to have to do it, because they're recognizing, more and more companies, that they're not getting growth. They are losing people. They are in a very different environment where AI is going to start becoming very, very strong in the way they're being influenced. I would far rather take a broader outlook on the world, so AI has a much better chance to actually give you the values that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think, and I was debating as you were talking there, because there's a number of ways you could take this conversation around. I agree with all those points, and I hope that we can start to move more and more examples. As I said, there are some, it's just not, they're few and far between in terms of that. But thinking about how do you start to know where to focus to unlock value, right? So like there's this question of how do you unlock value through partner ecosystems, but also where's the right place, right? Not everything lends itself naturally to an ecosystem. And so if you buy into the principle, like, I guess, what are the levers that you might be thinking about pulling, which might direct you to know where to go? And I was going to anchor that slightly for fear of dancing us around on two different threads here. I apologize. I know that you've anchored a lot of your thinking around ecosystems on an area that's close to your interest and heart around the energy transition. And parts of the energy transition lend themselves, some may say, more naturally to ecosystems, because there's a lot of shared problems that are quite low down Maslow's pyramid of needs that just need to set the sector up foundationally, right? It's not going to get the same support that perhaps historically that sector was given. And therefore, if it wishes to thrive and exist, it needs to come together in a more cooperative and collaborative way, even as competition, to try and resolve some of the foundational challenges that exist within that. I don't know which bit of that do you want to pull on, but there's like, how do we unlock value and how do we know where to focus?
I've chosen the energy transition because I believe it does give me the greater validation of why ecosystems are so valuable. Let's take hydrogen as one example, very, very briefly. Is everybody going to build a different type of hydrogen solution? Is everybody going to actually push one which is reliant on oil and gas or is reliant on renewable energy? Are you going to build monster hydrogen solutions? Are you going to build ones for local communities? Are you going to build ones for individual companies? How the whole thing screams ecosystem. I have to think through this. Then you've got the global aspect, which is, are you going to continue to allow a Africa or a Middle East or an Asia to be excluded from a lot of what we've been doing from a European or from an American point of view? Because if we are going to breathe the same air, we all breathe the same air, and that same air needs to have clean air, is what the argument is. To achieve that, if you take hydrogen as the example, you take solar, you take wind, or even if you take oil and gas, arguably, you've got to change what the planet is doing. So ecosystems is the natural environment for energy, in the fact of your thinking and where you're going.
So if we were to, and I definitely agree, and I think trying to apply that into other areas is maybe I think you have done it in various places, and I like the thematic of energy. You know, it's a space we do a lot of work in as well. I think it can apply more broadly, as I'm sure you do as well, and trying to start to frame that into other sectors, perhaps even at a societal level. I was having an interesting discussion earlier today on this around cities and healthy cities and smart cities and other things. Again, these are all ecosystems. They're all pieces of a complex system that thrive on it. How do we think about? So we've got these partner ecosystems. You're using the acronym PE earlier and confused me a little bit, but we'll stick with rather than private equity, we've got partner ecosystems.
Okay. Right.
We've got what are the levers for unlocking value? Right? What are the structures that people might be thinking of, and how do we align those to business strategy and what's important to the company?
Yeah, let's come back to the article that has triggered our conversation or this opportunity, which is how do we unlock value through partner ecosystems? And we had 4 pillars there. The pillar was revenue growth and market expansion. There was innovation and competitive advantage, operational efficiency and cost saving, and brand equity and customer loyalty. There's no difference than if we were doing it from just a pure innovation point of view or whatever else. It is moving across and saying, what does ecosystems add that is going to make those different and unlock them? And I look at it in this way. We can enhance our capabilities by working with more people and getting more opinion and getting more knowledge and more intelligence together. We can accelerate innovation simply by the very nature that we're into broader networks, and we can begin to look at how do we get revenue, how do we get market expansion, how do we make a competitive advantage. Ecosystems do lend themselves to distinct value propositions. So the people you bring into your ecosystem tend to lock in, not lock in from the point of excluding other people out, but by the very nature of what they are bringing together and pooling together as their knowledge and their experiences, they are giving you a distinct competitive advantage that you might not get on your own. There's a greater scalability that one can get through these four pillars by applying them on an ecosystem manner. One can get a much longer term perspective, and out of that impact, if one basically takes these four pillars and saying, I am going to work not so much in my short term as an individual company, I'm going to construct a vision. I want to change something, be it the healthcare industry, be it industrial automation, be it a whole host of areas which are broad in scope that need greater collaboration, because we need to break those down. And you begin to then move into, how do you bring in technology and its robustness in your own environment? You can spend so much. When you bring in a number of other people, you get a broader ability to use technology. You can tap into somebody that's got a greater expertise in data analysis or data interpretation, or how you build your technology. And you're getting out of this unlocking value a more strategic impact. So I think you can get, by unlocking these four ecosystems, and we touched really on examples, and maybe we go into that now, but the value needs are, how do you bring those in to get that expansion of your thinking into partner ecosystems or ecosystems? So that's how I see that article and how it was written.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that alignment of those four pillars back to things that are extraordinarily tangible to businesses, because things can feel very far away, right? I actually think there's real evidence to show that, this can drive quite short-term value as well as medium and longer-term value from an organizational perspective. So I like that framing. Before we get into some of the good examples, and we will get there, I thought we could just look at, if someone's interested in this, right? They're looking to build one. The next first step isn't very logical. So what are some of the key considerations to how to go about building this? Does they start building their own networks, building their own platforms? Like, what are your thoughts around it?
I want to keep it simple for people, and that is to say, how do you extend beyond your existing reach? So you use that as your first area to say, do I need to extend? How would I extend? Who do I need to extend with? And what will that possibly give me? And keep asking all the time, why? Why am I doing this? Why do I think it's good? Get yourself comfortable that naturally it begins to form that we need either partner ecosystems or ecosystem thinking and design. Then you basically say, well, I've been innovating on my own, or I've been innovating with one or two people. How do I open that up and make that more cooperative or co-innovative in my thinking? How can I, learn from pushing that out slowly by participating a little bit more with a few more people, by learning from that, by sort of saying, oh, I've got either a lot more skills myself than I thought I had, or I realize I don't have enough skills and capabilities. And that's a big aha before you step into, I want to go ecosystems because I think it's a great place to go. And then I think the other two ones are, I do believe we are, as I say, in an adjusting, changing environment. And much as I see it maybe a little more darkly than maybe you do, I do share optimistic views as well on it, because I think ecosystems are one of the optimistic views I'm sharing here. And it's, how do we learn to collaborate within that? I read more and more people as they come on and feel more confident with themselves, they tell you about failure. And I think organizations and individuals in organizations should talk a lot more about that failure and not just say, here's my scar and here's my wound, which we've all got, but here's my opportunity that somebody could reach in and say, here's the way I would mentor you, here's the way I would coach you, number one, or here's the way we overcame that. And why don't we actually come together? Because maybe there's something here that's going to give us value. So keeping it relatively simple, not going for the big, I must go ecosystem straight away. I would go step by step, pace by pace.
One of the big challenges as you start to build these, and I've been involved in quite a number now, is who's controlling what, right? Because you want people to come across and collaborate, but somewhere there's an instigator who probably drives this. And so how do we maintain the right level of trust and collaboration in these ecosystems, and how do you see them actually practically working? And from first-hand experience, it's complicated.
I think another constraint we've got at the moment with ecosystems is people believe they must be the orchestrator. They must be the one that takes control, shapes things. And by the very nature of doing that, they're actually excluding a lot of opportunity. They don't want to invest time in discussing it. They've got a clear view of what they want to do for their business, and you come along with me. Well, that's a partnership. That's not a partner ecosystem. But a partner ecosystem, I believe, needs a far greater third party. I think it needs what I call an unbiased arbiter, and that is somebody that can say, "Hey, look, you guys, battle it out, work it out, but I can provide you a number of value aspects, not just a platform, because, go to AWS or go to Microsoft if you just want a technology platform. I'm giving you the intelligence behind a way for you to move in ecosystems." Let me summarize what I think those could be. It has to be well functioning. It has to be proven. Is it a technology platform that already works and already been in place for a long time? It gives people trust. It gives people confidence, number one. As you get into more collective intelligence and diverse perspectives, how do you bring that into a more neutral place, a neutral environment where it can be interpreted by somebody in an unbiased way? And then you can say, take it for what it's got. If you want to put it through your own AI system, or you want to put it through your own collective group, that's great. I'm giving you, I think, added value by putting that collective intelligence in place to be able to give you that. I think I can give you resource pooling, which you don't have at the moment. I can give you access to a network of people that, quite frankly, are so diverse and so crazy sometimes that you might actually be surprised, but not crazy at the idea, but just surprised from where the idea came from, for you to be able to say, we could build on that. But you don't then take it away and say, thank you very much, I'm on that. You can bring it in and say, well, in that diversity of networks, we are going to keep bringing in this lot of collaborative networking people that you've got. How do you cross-pollinate? By coming onto a third party that's got a broader viewpoint of dealing in health, dealing in water, dealing in energy, and saying, I can give you good examples of what they've done. And I can put those through a funnel or a machine, and I can come out and say, why shouldn't you in your industry be thinking that way that the water system is working, or something like that? It's aha, I never even thought of that. That's hugely valuable. You don't get that if you want to impose your thinking onto the team. I think, just getting a more open, dynamic network of people, it's a bit buzzy, but I think it's a great place. And you need to continue to sort of convey that, so that open sharing. how do you build out innovation? I think anybody that shuts out other people's innovation and what they've done, what they've achieved, and what they've failed to achieve is going to be stuck in their own world. So they've got to come out of that. Third parties can nudge, third parties can bring it out. And I do think by having a whole bunch of highly good, proven collaborative tools in place is actually enabling 5 or 6 companies to say, I've got my favorite tool, I've got my favorite tool, is to say, well, actually, these are good tools, but we think this tool has proven because we've got a track record in it. So I believe there's a very strong argument for accelerating third-party ecosystem management.
Obviously, I'm going to champion that all day long, and I from first-hand experience have tried a variety of different tracks on all of this. I do think it comes back to, and again, I think they can feel quite big and esoteric, these things, and to a degree, you do need a varied collection of different actors, perspectives, budget and problem holders within this, as well as solution providers from a range of different backgrounds. But in reality, once you start getting into the work to be done, they cluster into smaller groups typically, right? Because not everyone's going to have the same shared problem or be willing to come to the table to work around that. And maybe if we dig into, we've got a few minutes left on this now, some of the examples of what have worked, and I might interject with a couple of points from my own side as well.
I've done this in 2 ways. I've been looking to say what has people seem to have got success out of from partner ecosystems. So arguably are these templates, which is, number one is obviously is sustainability. How do I actually move my business forward? I need other people in it. So I need to think about partner ecosystems from a sustainable point of view. Number two, more and more people are saying, how do I regenerate? How do I, in an agricultural environment, how do I work with people that want to regenerate their land, regenerate their sort of the crops that they're doing? How do they actually? So regeneration, I think, is going to come out stronger and stronger and stronger. Thirdly, there's a loyalty to partner ecosystems. How do I build a more loyal group of people in a partner ecosystems? Then, how do I simply get more association with what I want to do, make it more aspirational? And let's now break that down into good examples. Patagonia, which is a wonderful company, or Nestle, which is another company, are all applying regeneration practices into agriculture. So Nestle have recognized that by having coffee that is grown in a given way, it's going to give them a potential to offer a bio coffee, a better flavor coffee, et cetera, that grows their business. But they don't do it with one grower. They've got to do it on a magnitude of the world on where they buy their coffee. So they've got themselves a partner ecosystem, which is a regeneration one, same as Patagonia does. Siemens or Schroeder are more into industrial application. Siemens is turning themselves into a digital enterprise and working alongside their 100,000 customers and saying, how many of you will come inside and use what we've learned? And we've put now an API on that. So there's you can use that and apply that into your own industrial application. So that whole marketplace has expanded significantly. Schroeder, on the other hand, have focused very much on their alliance program, much stronger. So they said, I need to do that. Then you've got Philips or you've got GE from a healthcare point of view. They're doing far more diagnostic capabilities. So they're going to hospitals, they're going to government institutions, they're going to whole host of different types of organization that can give them that ability. So they're investigating the digital twin. They're investigating all sorts of the metaverse and how they can work that. So people can say, when I look at a healthcare problem of an individual, where can I draw down information? How do I apply to that individual so I can make a better diagnostic for an individual, or I can apply a broader diagnostic capability as a government to actually encourage it forward. You've got Starbucks as a good example. They've built out loyalty programs, and a host of other companies that are doing those. Now, are those partnerships? Yes, but they're actually getting more closer to their customers through those loyalty programs, which gives them a broader ecosystem to be able to feed back and understand what they're doing. They're experimenting with their coffees, they're experimenting with this. Then you've got Microsoft, you've got AWS, you've got Apple. They're all into partner ecosystems in a very big way. I am surprised. Microsoft get 95% of their business from partner ecosystems. Mm-hmm. 95%. Now, okay, yeah, they're a technology company, but yes, but you need them in your own ecosystem. They've got terrific experience to provide you not just technology solutions, but ability to avoid this mistake or go down that wrong path. You've got a favorite of mine, which is Alibaba. Alibaba have built their own huge ecosystem of offerings, and they've gone out there and they've offered it to the Chinese market and said, you buy from us. Okay, you could say that's a lock-in, but it's given a huge opportunity for people to say, I can do one-stop shopping through Alibaba because I can go across to this part of their business, that part of their business. So that's loyalty, that's integration, that's whatever. And then they've got another good example, which is Unilever. They've got a far higher emphasis now on how do we make our business sustainable? How do we focus on climate as an important part of our messaging? And how do we go back and work with our suppliers, work with our producers, work with our customers to be able to bring everybody into a more cohesive understanding of what sustainability can give us and what climate challenges are going to be needed to be overcome. So you've got a host of good examples of big companies. And then if you look underneath those, and I'm not going to do that now, is the next tier. There are tiers of ecosystem management. One can go underneath those, that's for sure. But those are pretty good examples. Another one at the moment that I'm in a conversation with was with Bosch. Bosch are turning their management on its head at the moment. Growth platforms, ecosystems. They're not talking anymore about a product that can deliver the famous drill bit, which was the job to be done, that has been, flogged to death for nearly 20 years. They're saying we need to find growth platforms, and we've got to say we've got intelligence in our marketplace, we've got capabilities, we've got this, but let's now reform and rethink in a growth position or an ecosystem position, because we've got, like Siemens, like Schroeder, we've got capability that we can actually, outsource and provide and bring other people in to actually say, we can come along with you on this path. It's changing.
It is evolving. I think there's some nice examples in there. I think in what I would like to see more examples where they're a little bit less platformed by the large brand at the top of it, and more, as we suggested through some of this dialogue and conversation, a little bit more egalitarian in their construct. So back to this platform neutrality and the orchestrator being somewhat independent, right? Like I'd struggle to argue that Nestle is independent in its ecosystem or others, right? And so I think that they're good examples, don't get me wrong, but I think if we can find ways to get true cooperation and collaboration happening where there isn't the obvious cheerleader or conductor at the top of it, who's the budget holder and the big brand that's driving that, somewhat to their own interest. Right?
And we can drive through that, Simon, quite quickly, which is look around Europe. We have a hydrogen association. We have a water association. Exactly. We have on and on and on and on. There are huge number of associations that are a little bit they're certainly resource starved to actually go and do this, they've got to draw in this collection of companies that are prepared to sit around an association table. And it is surprising. And we take energy again. Enel, which is a good company, for example, to look at, they recognize that an ecosystem is going to give them a far greater opportunity to revamp their suppliers, revamp what they can do in the Italian energy market, and also grow themselves out of just Italy into a Europe or into a South America, which is where they're established. They've come together in an interesting collaboration, which is very much more Italian driven at the moment, bringing in 6 or 7 or 8 utility companies and energy providers that are serving Italy and saying, how do we bring this together for us to actually harmonize our suppliers? How do we, if we need to harmonize them, or how do we accelerate our suppliers to do the needs of what we think our customers want? How do we want to take our customers' thinking and take that back to our suppliers? That's a good example, but there are a host of very good examples, I think, in Europe that will drive through the point of, has to be platform driven by a given company? Partly yes, but partly I think we've got a lot of opportunity, and then EU funding possibly kicks in, associations kick in that can bring that together.
Yeah. Well, there's some plenty of food for thought, and I'm conscious of time now, so I'm going to start to wind us in, and ask for any closing thoughts that you might have before I close out what has been a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, I had my Christmas hat on, I suppose. I was thinking, okay, I've done a number of posts this year. I've got about 12 quotes that I don't think I'll do all 12, but I'll send you the quotes, and then you can maybe put them inside some of the conversations. So something goes floating across the screen as people are nodding off because Paul Hobcraft's talking too much. And so, well, that's an inspiring quote, or not an inspiring quote, but a food for thought quote. For example, I think any competitive advantage unfolds in stages. I think we're too much searching today for the competitive advantage immediately. I believe competitive advantage in an ecosystem environment happens in stages. Like everything in an environment grows steadily and in stages. So that's to be one. I mean, how do we get trust and flexibility and innovation together, and to say and realize the potential that ecosystems can have if we've got those three things in place? Another one is, how do we offer resilience, which I think we're going to need more of in the near term, and the agility and the adaptability than we actually have today? Is that through our tools, through our technology? So it's another one. Or how do we tackle complex challenges? And that has to be together, heads on. It cannot be on our own. So there's a number of like quotes I've got here that might you just cull and look at and say. My final one is if we are going to create a new world, if there is such a belief, a real world, we need real world solutions. And that needs far greater powerful networks of collaborators. That comes towards what ecosystems, I think, should go.
Good. Some very good, profound thoughts. I feel like all of those could be discussions unto themselves that maybe we pick up in another forum or in another way. Thank you very much, Paul. It's been really insightful, a really good conversation. Somewhere in here, I was thinking this flip from risk aversion to the other side of that coin, and positing that as maybe worrying a little bit less about what you might lose and thinking a little bit more about what you might gain from these types of setups and these types of ecosystems.
I was always taught very early on, risk and opportunity are actually the same coin.
Yeah.
You flick a coin and you're going to get some risk, but you're going to get opportunity. You flick a coin, you've got opportunity, but you're going to get risk. And I think that coin, flicking the coin and saying risk is on one side, opportunity the other, is a good way of talking about it.
Good analogy. Let's rig the coin so it's both sides opportunity. Hey?
That's for sure.
Exactly. So, look, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you everyone for joining us on this adventure through partner ecosystems on the Total Innovation Podcast. A huge thanks again, Paul, for some incredible insights on this topic of partner ecosystems and how they're driving and can drive and will drive transformative change across industries. Remember, ecosystems thrive on collaboration, adaptability, and shared purpose. And it's all about experimentation and opportunity, like many of the things we know as innovators across organizations. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations. As always, keep innovating. If you've enjoyed it, please share this episode, check out previous episodes, and hit subscribe for a number of future episodes coming your way in 2025 and onwards. Thanks again, Paul.
Thank you, Simon, for an opportunity to spout forth.